Welcome to Griffonomics. So whether you are prepping for a high-stakes portfolio review or you're just, intensely curious about the future of autonomous defense, this deep dive is tailored specifically for you.
Yeah, we are getting into some really fascinating territory today with RedCat Holdings. Ticker symbol is RCAT.
Right, exactly. We're looking at their all-domain consolidation strategy.
Huh?
And to do that, we're pulling from a really dense stack of sources today.
Oh, yeah, it's a lot. We've got their Q1 2026 earnings transcripts, several SEC financial filings, specifically the 10Q and the DEF 14A.
And some highly tactical intelligence reports, too. So our mission for this deep dive is to generate a granular strategic report and an investment roadmap evaluating RedCat's multi-domain scale-up.
Basically, we need to answer a big question. Are they becoming this massive institutional consolidator or just, a dilution casualty?
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this, because before we even get into what they're building, we had to talk about how they're paying for it.
Right, the cash. You really have to understand that massive underwritten public offering from May 2026. I mean, it was huge.
Yeah, they priced it to raise $225 million at $9.40 a share. But the raw cash doesn't tell the whole story, does it?
No, not at all. It's the share dilution that's wild here. They had a baseline of roughly 122.7 million shares.
Right.
And then they issued 23.94 million new shares. So just right out of the gate, that is a 19.5% base share dilution.
And if the over-allotment is fully exercised, that actually jumps to a maximum dilution of 22.4%, which is, that explains why the stock intentionally dropped 13% right after.
Exactly. The market reacted immediately to that hit.
It's basically like taking out a massive second mortgage on your house just to buy up all the surrounding empty lots before the neighborhood gentrifies. But I have to push back here. How is this cash actually being weaponized without triggering near-term liquidity friction?
Well, the thing is, taking that dilution hit actually eliminated their survival liquidity risk completely. They walked away with a $350 million pro forma cash equity cushion.
Wow, $350 million.
Yeah. So now they aren't worried about keeping the lights on. They're just deploying capital. Look at their M&A. They bought Quaise Technologies for wireless power.
Right, so the drones can charge on a pad instead of needing manual battery swaps.
Exactly. And they also dropped $19.8 million to acquire Apium Swarm Robotics, which gives them the software to control massive decentralized swarms.
So they're basically buying up the nervous system for autonomous defense. But, that cash influx isn't just buying companies. It's funding huge, empty factories.
Oh, the physical footprint expansion is aggressive.
Yeah, because we're looking at a glaring paradox here. In Q1 2026, they saw an 849% year-over-year revenue increase, hitting $15.5 million. But their gross margins are stuck in a trough at just 12.7%.
Right, which sounds terrible until you look at the strategy. It's what analysts call the factory as a weapon thesis.
Okay, break that down for us.
So management deliberately overbuilt their physical manufacturing footprint. They expanded in Salt Lake City to produce like 1,000 drones a month.
And they have that massive maritime facility too, right?
Yeah, they leased a 155,000 square foot boat facility down in Valdosta, Georgia. So they essentially built enough capacity to handle well over $1 billion in annual revenue.
But they're currently absorbing massive fixed overhead against low initial unit volumes. So the big question is, when exactly does production step up to fix these margins?
That is the pivotal moment we're waiting for. We are looking for the revenue trigger, which is the $9.5 million Army SRR Tranche 2 order.
SRR being short-range reconnaissance.
Exactly. Right now, they are in LRIP, low-rate initial production, specifically the TD3 phase. It's basically beta testing for the military. Low volume, high cost.
But they're shifting out of that.
Yeah, they're shifting to full-rate manufacturing. They have to meet the Army's expanded 2200 SRR system J-book requirements. And as they do that, those heavy fixed costs spread out across thousands of units, which is how they plan to drive margins up to their 30% target.
Which makes sense. But to fill those factories, they need a product the Pentagon is desperate for. Which brings us to the Black Widow.
Yeah, their flagship drone.
The competitive chasm here is just insane. It has a 52-minute flight endurance, a fully field repairable modular design, and, this is the crazy part, the design evolves every 3 weeks based on direct combat feedback from Ukraine.
3 weeks is unheard of in traditional defense cycles.
Exactly. Contrast that against legacy incumbents like AeroVironment or even Silicon Valley rivals like the Skydio X-10D. It's wildly fast.
What's fascinating here is how they manage that agility. They use what they call the open Kimono playbook, or in military terms, a modular open systems approach, MSA.
Right. Instead of locking the military into proprietary software, they're acting as the hardware foundation.
Exactly. They build the premium hardware and let third parties integrate software. For instance, they integrated Anduril's Lattice OS, which the Army has effectively mandated anyway.
If you aren't on Lattice, you don't exist to the commanders.
Right. But the most lucrative one is Palantir's visual navigation software. It lets the drone navigate without GPS, and Palantir operates this on a revenue share model that adds like $12,000 to $15,000 per unit in margin.
Wow, $15,000 extra per unit.
Yeah.
Okay, so aerial dominance is huge, but it only covers launches from about 30% of the globe. To be an all-domain consolidator, you have to hit the water.
Which is exactly why they opened that massive Valdosta facility.
Here's where it gets really interesting. They aren't just building boats down there with their Blue Ops Maritime division. They are building the Variant 7 USV, an uncrewed surface vessel. It's basically a heavily armed autonomous network node.
Yeah, the Blue Ops multi-domain split is incredible. A crucial detail on that Variant 7 is that they are integrating Cometa's flat panel satellite wands directly onto the vessels.
Which means they can keep a connection in highly contested areas.
Exactly. And littoral waters where GPS and comms are denied or jammed, those Chimeta wands guarantee uninterrupted command and control.
Okay, so they have the air and the surface covered, but what about the undersea domain?
Ah, that is the missing link. But their strategy for the second half of 2026 addresses this perfectly. Remember that $350 million war chest?
Yep.
Well, armed with that cash and Apium's swarming software, they are perfectly capitalized to target a boutique UUV and undersea vehicle or a subsea sensor manufacturer.
Which would let them tap into the Navy's SAMP project spending.
Exactly. They can link surface motherships to subsea assets and capture those heavily funded undersea warfare initiatives.
Okay, so they have the cash, the factories, the tech. But let's conduct a financial forensic teardown here. What is the actual operational cost of moving this fast? Because the working capital burn looks intense.
It is intense. If you look at Q1, they had $31.9 million used in operating activities. And a big chunk of that was a $16.7 million G&A surge.
General and administrative, right? What's driving that?
Well, upgrading to a Big Four auditor, for one. Plus, they are building out infrastructure for mandatory SOX compliance by 2027, laying down CMMC cybersecurity frameworks, and, $3.3 million in stock-based compensation to attract talent.
Right, but I want to hone in on the supply chain trap because they have a $62.7 million working capital inventory trap.
Yeah, the balance sheet shows $50.5 million in net inventory and $12.2 million in prepaid assets.
And $38.5 million of that is highly concentrated in raw materials alone. Think about that for a second. If you are iterating your drone design every 3 weeks based on combat feedback, hoarding $38 million in raw parts is like buying a warehouse full of iPhone 14 screens right before the 15 drops.
That is a fantastic analogy, and it is a massive risk. They are incredibly exposed here. If government budgets stall due to continuing resolutions or a government shutdown, RCAT is sitting on severe exposure to rapid component obsolescence.
Because the design will move past the parts they already bought.
Exactly, and that leads to massive write-downs.
And inventory obsolescence isn't the only red flag buried in these SEC filings. We have to look at the legal and regulatory exposure, too.
Yeah, there is a consolidated federal securities class action right now. It's called Olson v. RCAT.
What are the plaintiffs claiming?
They're alleging false and misleading statements regarding the Salt Lake City manufacturing capacity disclosures and also the ultimate value of that SRR contract we talked about earlier.
Now, management calls the claims meritless, and they have zero loss contingencies recorded on the books. But defending a federal class action is really costly, and forced settlements are always a risk. So what does this all mean for their internal tracking?
Well, it ties directly to their 10Q disclosure. They reported material weaknesses in their internal controls over financial reporting, or ICFR.
Because they're growing too fast.
Basically, yeah. They are scaling massively, acquiring companies all over, and they have a critical lack of segregation of duties and under-resourced internal auditing. That raises a huge risk of future financial restatements.
Okay, so this brings us to the final verdict. We have to weigh these massive structural catalysts against the capital burn and this legal overhang. Are they an institutional leader or a dilution casualty?
You really have to look at the macro tailwinds to justify this burn rate. First, the U.S. government has a $54 billion to $74 billion budget slated for drone dominance.
That's a staggering amount of money.
It is. And then you have the American Security Drone Act, which is a massive geopolitical tailwind. It effectively bans Chinese DJI drones from federal agencies.
Which creates a huge vacuum.
Exactly. It creates an estimated $957 million displacement opportunity just in the civilian and public safety markets.
So the ultimate question for you listening is this. Does the DJI ban and that defense budget justify the 19.5% dilution and the intense cash burn?
It's basically a race against time. If that revenue trigger hits and their scaling absorbs all those fixed costs, RCAT becomes an undisputed multi-domain monopoly.
But if they don't?
If government contracts delay, they risk being completely crushed under their own overscaled infrastructure. Yeah. And I'll leave you with this final thought. As autonomous swarming networks scale across air, land, and sea, where will the ultimate enterprise value of a 21st century defense contractor actually lie? Is it in the disposable hardware they manufacture, or is it in the unified software and data networks that control them? It is a really crucial question as physical hardware margins continue to face intense scrutiny.
That is the trillion-dollar question right there. Risk defined, portfolio protected.